Where do I go? What will I be? It's who I am. What will they see? Maybe I pray, yeah. At the end of my days, yeah. What will I say? What will they say?
What's going on? Episode 23, welcome to it. This one's going to be, let's do episode 23 and make it episode 24. This one's going to be a two-part. And the guest I got on today is Kristi Overton. Kristi Overton's a world champion skier, and she's got an incredible story. But the reason I think we're going to split it up into two is she really started out doing, it's a matter of couldn't and wouldn't, I think, the more I've had time to think about it. Kristi started off doing what others couldn't do, and now she's kind of moved to a career and a life of what others wouldn't do or won't do. And I guess what I mean by that is she started off doing what no one else could do on the water. World champion skier, crazy talented, especially for a woman. She trained with men, and she's just incredibly talented, both God-given and I believe in both just hard work and perseverance and training. And the reason for the split too is that's most of the episode 23. Episode 24, which I guess we'll put out in a couple of days, will be what she's doing now, what others won't do or wouldn't do, in her work of providing hope to the hopeless, her work of what she's doing in prisons, and going where a lot of us won't do. So that's what I mean. I think it's just a matter of starting off what others couldn't do and now what others wouldn't do. And I did want to say too, before we hop in, I thank you guys for the support. I thank you for subscribing. And just following along with what we're doing and just tracking down stories and what can we learn from each other, famous, not famous. We all have a story. It's just a matter of if we're willing to tell it. And so, so let's get into it. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. But what I wanted to start off by saying is I've talked to, like I said, Mike Taylor, Derek Clark, Rob Hall, Mike Amon, and someone else I'm blanking on. Obviously Ashley, but everyone has kind of pointed back to, you can move that however you want to move it. Everyone has kind of pointed back to you. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting, and it's also a little bit discouraging to me, but it's interesting how we're all kind of connected. And so, so Kristi Overton, or it's not Overton, it's...
I use it all. Kristi Overton Johnson.
Okay, sorry about that. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Obviously there's a lot about you, and I don't even know really where to start. But if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Pretend like not everyone in Greenville knows who you are.
Okay. Yeah, so I grew up in Greenville, North Carolina, and absolutely loved being raised as a Carolina girl. Grew up on the water. My dad, Parker Overton, was a river rat. He loved being in the water. And my mother learned to love to be in the water because my dad was just so into it. And so that's what they would do. They would go out on the boat. And at 4 years old, he shared his love of the sport with me. And that's when I learned to water ski for the first time. And I learned these words, hit it, which is the command that the skier gives to the boat driver when they're ready to go. And so for the next 35 years, from 1974 until I think it was 2009, is when I had my last competition. So I think that's 35 years of competing around the world. Never knew when I said hit it for the first time that God would take me to so many amazing places and give me such an incredible journey. It was filled with highs. It was filled with lots of lows. Many times crying my eyes out in a porta potty on the side of a lake somewhere. Learned to get over it quick because it stunk in there. So it was quite a life, and it's something my family did together. My dad at around 76 started Overton's Water Sports, and he started that simply because he had a hard time finding water skis.
Did you say 1976?
Yeah, it was around there, 1975.
Okay.
It was all about the same time as my first tournament, and then we were all getting into competing in the sport of water skiing, and he had difficulty finding new equipment. So he would call the manufacturers like O'Brien or Conley, and they would directly ship it to him. Well, when he'd show up at a tournament the next week or a couple of weeks later, people were wanting to buy
Whatever.
whatever he had. And so he started buying a couple of extra life vests, gloves, things like that. And I can still remember the trunk of his car open and men lined up in their bathing suits,
No kidding.
looking at the latest goods.
He was like Amazon before it was Amazon.
It was Amazon before it was Amazon. And so then he started mail order, shipping the equipment to whoever called that 1-800 number. And he had grown up in the grocery business. We had Overton Supermarket on Jarvis Street in Greenville, right by East Carolina, and they had the best meats in town. So his first mail order catalog was water skis at supermarket prices.
Oh, wow.
And his career took off the same time mine took off. And so it was really this parallel journey of our entire family. My mom was my coach. My brother was Michael was my boat driver. This was a family affair. My dad just sponsoring all these athletes across the world, helping them achieve their dreams. And it was just a beautiful family adventure. But when I was around 10 years old, it really became evident that I had some skills, I guess you'd say. I mean, I had been winning since I was 5 years old and doing really well. I'd surpassed my dad and mom's abilities when I was really young. But at 10 years old, I was able to compete in the open level, so against 20 and 30 years old.
For real?
For real.
Wow. So wait, going back, what got your dad so interested in being on the water?
I don't know. I mean, other than he just enjoyed it. My granddad, they had a river cottage down in Belhaven or Bellevue or something like that on the Pamlico River. And it was, my dad had to work a lot in the family grocery business, but that was his outlet. Like, you know,
his escape sort of.
The Sundays that he had off and the Wednesday afternoons, he didn't get a lot of time off. He would take to the water. And so that's what we did as a family. And it was a wonderful family activity just to be in the boat the whole time. But like I said, 1980, it became very evident that, okay, I'm going pro here very soon. And I did at age 13. And to make that transition, I really needed a better facility to train because the Pamlico River and Back Creek, as awesome as it wasn't conducive to training.
Yeah,
so
right.
Dad bought a track. Dad and Mom bought a track of farmland in Grimesland, and if you've ridden out off of Mobley's Bridge Road, you've seen Lake Kristi. And it started out. I love that place because it's such a illustration of vision. It was dirt, it was trees, it was farmland, and my dad saw something that wasn't there.
Yeah, right.
And I just always think about God, like he looks at us and we got this dusty life going on, it's barren, it's not fruitful, and he's like, no, I see what it can be.
Yeah, right. That's good.
And that's what my dad and Mom, they made that leap of faith to go and to do something not many people were doing. And Lake Kristi was formed, and then over the years, that place is just, every year, I'm going to put a tree here. I'm going to sow some Bermuda grass. I'm going to put a couple greens over here. I'm going to rescue some horses and rescue some dogs. And now it's the cross-country facility for East Carolina University. We just had a huge event last weekend, which was like the national conference championships. So
how many acres is it?
Oh, hundreds.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's 200.
Oh, wow.
So it's all the course is Bermuda grass. And
how does your brother feel about you having a lake named after yourself and you're not having one?
He has Michael Islands.
Oh.
But it's really interesting. Michael never loved to water ski. It just wasn't his thing.
Really? Did you feel like he had pressure to do it though?
Oh, he had some pressure because every year he at least had to do it once, and I can still remember. My dad and you're going to do this, son. But he just didn't love it. But what he loved was engines and driving. He's always loved driving race cars, driving boats, flying airplanes. And so he liked to be behind the wheel. And so that's what he did. And it worked out perfect because he drove and I skied, Mom coached, and Dad worked to pay for all of it.
How was your relationship? Because, so my son's, he's 10, he plays soccer. And we always said, like, I enjoy coaching him, but he's getting to this age where it's like, he's going to listen to somebody else more than he listens to me. How was that tough having your mom as your coach, or did it change to someone else, or?
We had a wonderful relationship that is probably very rare. She was my best friend, still is. I just respected her a lot, but it wasn't always easy. And I know for her, having to put coach hat on, but I knew she could see, even as a young person, I knew that she could see things I couldn't. And so she would, even though she couldn't do them, she would sit and listen to the other coaches and say, okay, her shoulders need to be level, her eyes need to be up, and different things. And so my mom's got a great eye for detail in everything in life. And so she could always spot the thing that was wrong. And she could always point out, okay, I see you doing this. And I knew she was right. It wasn't always an easy pill to swallow. And especially when I became a teenager, it's like, you're just like, all right, I just think I'm ready for a different, I mean, I was growing stagnant. And I think it was a very hard decision in 1988 to leave Lake Kristi and my family, who had given up everything for me.
Right.
And not given up everything, but really made huge sacrifices. And now I'm going to go away to Florida. And the reason I think they supported it so much as well is because they knew I had reached as far as I was going to go. And I needed a new training regimen. I needed a new set of coaches. And so what I did was we found the best guy skiers in the world. My dad struck up a deal with one of them, like, my daughter can train out here, and they worked out all financial things. And my job was to show up and get off the dock. And I did. And it was such a different environment for me, because all of a sudden it wasn't like, okay, I'll go ski later because it's too windy. And, I've got this perfect little private lake. I'll just wait till later. I can go later. No, I'd show up and it would be white caps or raining. And those guys would look at me and say, "You're first."
Oh, wow.
And they were kind to me, but they treated me like one of the guys, and probably more tough.
That help you?
Tougher. I don't know what the word is. It did help me, because I'm very competitive, and I had never trained with guys. And so, and I'd trained, I'd never not been, I don't know how to say this without sounding prideful, but I'd always been at the top.
Right.
Okay, I'm trying to say that.
Never really truly challenged, maybe?
So I was always having to challenge myself, because, I could beat my parents at 7 or 8 years old. And, my training partner was wonderful, and she was a pro level skier. And that did keep me on my toes. But when I got there, and there was these guys that were skiing more buoys than me, jumping further than I was, tricking more points, I didn't like it.
Yeah, right.
And it was a perfect setup, because they didn't like getting beat by a girl either. So I pushed them, they pushed me. I learned to ski in conditions that I had never imagined that I could even get up on the water in those
And how old are you at this point?
I
You
was
said
18.
18 years old.
So I went to UCF, University of Central Florida, on a water ski scholarship. And the reason I chose there is because that's where water skiers end up, is in Central Florida, from all over the world, either there or West Palm area. From all over the world. Everybody comes there and descends on Orlando, Windermere, Winter Park, Lakeland, Tampa, all that area. So I had just such a wonderful training regimen. I speak a lot in prisons, and I mean, that's what my life is now. But I always tell people, it's like, your circle of friends, that's, if you want to grow, this is for anybody, not just people incarcerated. You sometimes have to leave even good things. Like, I had to leave a great setup and great support system to go and risk all of that. And it was difficult, and leave home, but it was a sacrifice that we were all willing to make for this to work. And it did. And the first slalom pro event I entered, because I had even told myself, I'm done. I was done. I was tired.
You were burnt out?
I was burned out. And so I was like, I'm going to go change the scenery, which is important, change, the way I've been doing things. And I'm going to enter this tournament, the pro event in spring of 89. And if it goes well, then I'll continue. And I won.
What if it didn't go well?
I don't know what would have happened, but it didn't. I won. So.
Yeah, right.
But I probably would have kept going because I was renewed by then. I had seen, oh my goodness, I'm capable of so much more. And it just kept pushing me. And so from then on, I skied with the guys, and I was always pushed. And, the girls pushed me too,
right.
But still, every day I was competing against them. And
physically, that's just so different too.
It is.
I mean,
I don't care what people say. It is,
yeah,
even
tough.
on my best day, and I had huge arms, I still wasn't near as strong
right.
as Carl Roberts or Wade Cox. And I'd stand watching the boat, and a lot of times it was just watching them train, the intensity. I'm watching the pylon of the boat bend over. It wasn't bending over when I was skiing. And so it made me go harder and harder and realize I can give so much more. And so anyway, it really helped me to be in that training environment.
Did you hate it at the time, do you think? Or like just not enjoy it at the time?
When I had switched the training?
When you went down there and you're being
I loved
pushed.
it.
Oh, you did? Okay. Because I think sometimes we glorify the past where in the moment we
I loved it.
Okay, good. Yeah.
It was hard.
Right.
But I'd come home because I like challenges. I'm one of those weird people that likes to be pushed. Mm-hmm. I like pressure, and I like performing under pressure. Mm-hmm. Like, I just love it. And even now, it's like I love deadlines. I like balancing lots of things, and it's just how I thrive on that.
Do you get bored real easy
I
if you don't?
Really bored.
Okay, that's how I am too.
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of share. Obviously, I was not a competitive skier, but I feel like I share that same sort of thing. Like it's always like kind of what's next.
Yeah, I went to law school just to go to law school.
Really?
While I took the bar, I never practiced a day. I went into full-time ministry, but it was an intensity of, I like pushing myself to see what I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. And it's never been, my dad made sure of this, it was never about beating this person. It was about being the best that I could be, which worked for me. Mm-hmm. It became a problem when I was never good enough in my eyes. And so there's a big balance because on the one hand, I kept pushing and pushing, and I'm holding world records and winning world championships and being the first woman to do this and that. And then, but yet I'd come home, it's like, you can do more. You're not good enough. And nobody was telling me that except for in here, these thoughts. And so I could go win the worlds, but come home and feel defeated sometimes because I knew I'd left something out on the lake. So that took a long time for me to learn how to balance that. And even now in ministry and the things that I get to do now, I'm having to realize it's not all about performance. It's definitely not about being perfect. And it's not about making everybody happy. It's impossible combination. So I'm having to learn to have some grace with myself. That's been a decade or two of trying to learn to do that. And it's, they say what your strength is also your weakness.
Give me an example of that.
Okay.
I think I agree with that.
My strength is I won't quit. I'll keep persevering. I don't mind pain. I'll just push through it. My weakness is I'll keep pushing through it. Right. I don't know when to quit because I won't quit. Mm-hmm. And so I had a life coach sitting with me one time. I've always tried to have mentors and life coaches as well. And he told me that. He was a pastor. He said, your greatest strength is your heart of perseverance and your work ethic. He says, it made you a world champion. Your greatest weakness is your work ethic. And he says, because you don't know when to quit. And he even told me, he says, a lot of times human effort can make a lot happen, but it's a good thing. It's not the God thing. And, I've had to really weigh, because I've had an opportunity to be a part of so many good things, and I have so many good ideas every day. Like my dad, I'm a visionary.
Yeah, right.
And then like my mom, I can get down in the nitty gritty details, and I can get myself in a lot of trouble because I'll have 100 ideas. And one of the things my life coach makes me do is I have an idea parking lot.
That's good.
And I have to put my ideas down so that I don't run to our team and say, this is what we're doing now. and then we're leaving. He calls it, and I know there's a term, organizational whiplash, but I'm like, I got all these amazing team members that are trying to follow me to the ends of the earth because they respect me and they love the Lord and they love this work. But yet I got to be very careful because I can have 100 ideas a day and they're good, but they're not, you can't do every good thing, or you won't have the great thing. You won't have the thing that you can really specialize in. And
So you have all these ideas, you park them in the parking lot. Then how do you know when to bring the car out of the parking lot?
if it keeps coming up and it won't go away. So like, for instance, this magazine, Victorious Living, I had an idea in my head. You need to write a magazine. You need to tell people stories. Okay. A couple months later, you need to have a magazine. It just keeps coming.
Yeah, that's good.
It keeps coming. Or even if it doesn't make sense, it won't go away. It'll wake me up in the middle of the night and I'm thinking about it. And I sleep pretty good. So that's kind of a telltale too. I'll wake up and I keep, why don't you go do this? And it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes to other people. It's something that won't go away. It's something that is risky, but yet it's exciting. And
how do you separate then? Because I feel like I agree. That's sort of the reason I sort of feel like I've started just doing this podcast, was it felt like a nagging urge I kept wanting to do. But how do you separate? That's just what I want to. Because I'm gonna assume that idea is a God-given idea that you're talking about. So how do you separate the idea that keeps coming up, and how do you separate from, is that just what Kristi wants, or is that what God's telling me to do? How do you separate those two?
Yeah, so for me, it's taking the time to pray and listen. You don't always have like a clear, he says, lean not on your understanding, trust in me, and I will direct your path. So my prayer is, Lord, I don't want to misstep. I don't want to go a direction that you're not wanting me to go, especially now that I have this team and financial commitments and all these people behind bars that are counting on this encouragement from the word that's coming through this Victorious Living magazine. I don't want to misstep, but I also don't want to lag behind.
Yeah.
And so that's my prayer. And the word says that if you're walking with him, he gives you the desires of your heart. And I believe what he does is he makes his desires your desires. Like they start to mesh together. And so can I share something with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I just remembered I have this. Let's see if I can.
That's a well-worn Bible right there.
Oh, yeah, it's tore up from the floor up. Okay, let's see. My test, this is exactly what you just asked. How to know if what I'm planning to do is spirit-directed or Kristi-directed.
That's it.
Is it my human effort trying to bring about God's promises in my life? Is it something I've reasoned I should do? Whenever I think of the word should, I should go do this. I should. A lot of times that's guilt-driven for me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, I should have gone and visited so-and-so. I should have done this. I should have said that. For me personally, that's because I can carry a lot of guilt. That's guilt.
Yeah, I think I agree with that for myself too.
And am I doing for the sake of doing, because I can get so easily bored? So did I have some downtime and now I'm just thinking of an idea to fill the void? No, I don't need to do that. Is it taking me away from my God-given gifts and what I know God's called me to do? So like, I know this is what I'm called to do. Going into prisons, writing people's stories. My role right now is leading a team. It's not being the performer and the producer. I've had to switch.
I could see that being a struggle.
It's a struggle.
Like wanting to have your hand. There's a difference, I think, between having your hands on all the things, but then having like you doing all the things.
Yeah, I used to do all the things.
Yeah.
And that's my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I can churn some stuff out. But if I want this to last beyond me, and I want it to be legacy.
Yeah, right.
Then like my life coach says, it used to be you going out and doing the performance, you and a ski rope and a ski behind the boat. Now it's me, like on a soccer team, coaching 11 people to go to the same goal, how to work together, we're going in this direction, and it's completely different and it's unnatural for me. So, I have to make sure, because I can get asked to do a lot of things, and I'm learning to say no, because I realized if I go say yes to being on that board or this board,
Yeah, right.
or going and speaking at every Rotary Club here, not that there's something wrong with it,
Right.
then I can't go to Montana last week and speak in drug treatment programs and meet the incarcerated family that I get to minister to on tablets and through the magazine. I have to balance those things.
Yeah,
That's
right.
not to say I never do that, but I have to stop and ask that question. Is it causing stress and stealing my joy? Is it making me miserable? And is it making the people around me miserable? Because now I've said yes to something that isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, and now I'm just stressed out all the time. I don't have peace. Peace is my, I still may have a sense of risk and like it's a little scary, but
Yeah,
yet
right.
I know I'm supposed to do it.
Right. There's an easiness to it, or a sense of ease. Yeah.
Ease, yeah. Only two more. Is it
There you go.
leading me to freedom, or is it burdensome? So that's kind of the same. And do I enjoy it? And do I see fruit from it? Or will I see fruit from it? Does it pump me up?
Yeah, right.
That's
Like give you
something-
life.
I want to do something I enjoy.
Yeah, right.
And that's not to say like I was just doing job descriptions and that makes my stomach hurt. But right now that lines up with I've got to get this stuff down with my life coach, and he's also a consultant, and then be able to lead. So I have to do some things I don't enjoy.
But if it's ultimately pointing to the bigger picture of this or whatever it is, then I think that you're not going to love it all. And I did hear you say too, is like I think, and I still want to hear how. I've heard a couple. I've done some research, and so I am curious to see how we went from world champion skier to where we are now. I know it's a long story, but the thing you made me think of is I remember hearing you say there's a perception of if we become a Christian, all of a sudden our life's kind of like boring, like full of commandments, full of thou shalt not do this, do that. And so, I do think I love what you say about what you just said about is it something you enjoy? Like I think becoming a Christian doesn't all of a sudden make you boring,
Right.
and make you just sit inside and read your Bible all day and not talk to anybody. It's whatever gives you life is different for everybody, I think.
It does. And in my mind, I always heard put God first. So I would get up and I'd say a quick prayer. And then as I got older and a little more mature, maybe I'd be reading the Bible in the morning, but it was like a checklist. And then I would put God on a shelf, or I'd leave him in the pew, and I'd go ski. I'd go be a mom. I'd go try to write a story. I'd go try to write a book or whatever. And I've learned it's not God then something. It's God in something.
Yeah.
It's in your motherhood, in your marriage, in your ministry, in your podcasting.
Right.
That doesn't have to mean you go and preach at people all the time, but you're just
Right.
like, okay, God, would you lead me these questions? You're good at this. Like you're gifted at this. I've done a
Appreciate
lot
you
of
saying that.
interviews. And this is your gifting, storytelling, great questions. But asking God, would you help me? Would you help me expose the part of this person's story? I do that every time I ghostwrite someone's article. Like I've never walked in JC's shoes here.
Right.
I was not of a Hispanic background. I don't know what it feels like to have experienced prejudice or racism, and I don't know what it is to be in a gang. I don't know what it's like to have been raped or abused or drowned in a bathtub. But yet I can sit there and say, God, help me.
Yeah.
And then it's like this story will flow out, and he helps me. And I didn't realize that. Like I grew up going to church, and I felt that God was condemning. He was controlling. He was sovereign. So whatever, it was going to happen anyway. And he was a big judge and ready to, a lot of times I'd hear, are you telling the truth? God's watching you.
Yeah.
God knows.
Heck yeah, I remember
And
that.
now I'm like, thank God he's watching me.
Yeah.
And he knows that I'm like in a snowstorm right now in Montana driving to the airport. That was me last week. I am so glad you see me right now. I mean, it used to scare me because I felt so much guilt and shame. Now it's like, no, this is a God that created me, that loves me, that is calling me out off a dock onto adventure, not a life of misery.
That's it.
I have come to give you life and give it to you more abundantly. Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And one way he does that is convinces you as a believer that life, or even as a non-believer, that if you believe, you're going to have to give up everything that makes your life worth living, when all he says is, I've came to give you life. And I have life now that's apart from trophies. I'm not Am I still competitive? Yeah. Am I still want to do things with excellence? Yes. I mean, I want an excellent magazine. I want excellent podcast on our prison tablets. I want excellent videos and teachings and things like that. And that motivates and drives me. But it's not so it reflects well on me. It's to help people find the peace and joy and contentment that I now have that I didn't have even as a world record holder, or someone with their own lake, or someone with financial blessings that drives a great car. That cannot make you happy.
Right. I think there's so many thoughts I have that I want to ask you about. I'm trying to think where to run it first. But I think one thing that's so interesting is you're still the same person. You still have the same strengths. It's just now it's leveraged with God. It's like you're super competitive. And some people might even become a drug addict because they're also, I mean, I think addiction starts, and I share some of those same traits.
I'm addicted to work.
Yeah, and which is really good in a sense. But then it's like, is it fitness? Is it drugs? Is it whatever? But I think what's interesting is when I became a believer, or I think when people become believers, truly, you still take your same thing. You still are the same person. My brain is really close to my mouth right now, so I'm trying to verbalize the thoughts right here.
That's
but
good.
It's like he leverages everything that you already are and uses it for his own good. And that's like with his story and with other people's you've shared. It's like through the pain and misery and the gangs and whatever else he was in, it's like, now, okay, well, awesome. Now we're going to leverage that for his own good in those things that he probably never wanted to talk about or just completely ignore once he became a believer, thinking that life's behind me. I'm not going to talk about it. Where I think everything's spun on its head and people become believers because of the things he went through. So I don't know. I guess I don't know really what my point is there, but just not changing who you are.
It doesn't change who you are. It redirect. You think about Paul on the road to Damascus.
Yeah.
God chose someone who was murdering people.
Right.
To be the one who wrote a majority of the New Testament, to teach us and lead us how to be leaders and how to be examples to people, how to live a Christian life. And the reality is God saw something in Paul. It was just misdirected.
That's it.
It was misdirected, and he thought he was doing right. And, he's killing Christians because he's a religious person trying to serve God, and then he meets the Lord, and all of a sudden, all that effort just gets tweaked just a little bit down this other path, but it was the same tenacity.
That's it.
It was, Paul would be stoned, he would be snake bit, he would be shipwrecked, and what would he do? He'd get up and go again.
Right.
Why? Because he was tenacious. And so that's the thing. I look at JC here. As a drug dealer, the man had skills.
Right.
He could work the street. He was loyal. He's loyal to a fault.
That's good.
And that's why he kept getting promoted, because he was known for his loyalty.
Right.
He was known for his loyalty to be able to transport. So you're going from point A to point B to point C. He was in charge of making sure things got delivered on time. So all of those skills can now get redirected. His athletic and his exercise, and he was a champion weightlifter and all this kind of stuff. You know what he's doing now? He's using those skills, going into prisons and helping people find fitness. And helping people know how to come out of gangs, helping people. So, because he's been there.
That's it.
But those same skills, your negotiating skills.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, you're using the same thing that you're gifted at.
Right.
People that are incarcerated are gifted. They're gifted. They're smart. And it's just the Lord taking all of those skills that he gave them that for whatever reason were used in a negative way. A lot of times it was just merely to survive. And now they get to use them.
Yeah, that's
in a
way better
different
said
way.
than I was trying to do.
No, you asked it perfectly.
Just kind of re-navigating where with the same traits and the same skills. The second question I had for you that made me think, and man, my brain is just not working. It was about it'll come to me. Maybe it won't. It will later on. So, world champion skier, 18 to like 22-ish college time frame. You won the world championship, didn't you? Mm-hmm. Okay. So was that a pinnacle of that? Or like of the skiing?
In a way, it was. So the Masters really is The U.S. Masters is probably the most coveted.
Okay.
The Worlds is fantastic, but a lot of times not everybody gets to compete in the Worlds because it's team selected. So there were many years I couldn't even ski at the Worlds because I was specializing in the slalom event, and they wanted multi-event people, or it's just really hard to explain.
Right.
But, so you wouldn't even get to go.
But the Masters is pretty much everybody.
No, the Masters is very exclusive invitation.
Oh, okay.
Where the Worlds can be people who they can barely run the course because they come from a country. So you got people from one country that are very novice,
right,
or intermediate,
and given
skiers.
the resources and stuff they probably have.
Yeah, and then you've got so many people like in the U.S. and England, different people that don't even get to go compete. Now it's changed, and now you can go off world record standings and all that kind of stuff. But back when I skied, it was coveted, but the U.S. Open, the U.S. Masters, and when I finally won the Worlds, I had been a world record holder for many years. So the reason it was so special for me is, one, everybody wants to win it.
Yeah,
You're world champion. But for me, I had been through a lot of physical pain. I had been through major surgeries. I was in a place of my walk with God that He was showing me through some trials, whether He allowed me to go through those trials or whether it was just natural things that happened or whether it was the enemy trying to take me out. I really don't know. But what I do know is when I had those trials, it caused me to fall pretty much flat on my face. And I realized, okay, if I don't have skiing, who am I? If I lose my health, which was what was happening, am I more than just a skier?
And what's so bananas is you started when you were 5 years old, like before your brain's even nearly developed. So that's all you knew.
That's all I knew.
Skiing.
Was Kristi.
That's
I was
crazy.
Kristi a skier.
Yeah.
There's billboards in town with, me and right there at Evans and Greenville Boulevard skiing, and everywhere I went, Kristi the skier.
It's like a bubble, kind of.
It was a bubble. It was who I was in my mind. So it's like, okay, if I'm not this skier, because all of a sudden I couldn't ski, who am I? And it really made me realize, okay, the people that I thought were going to be there weren't there. They just kept going on without me.
Like whoever was next, the greatest to...
The next skier became the greatest skier, got the paycheck. ESPN was not there covering the story of me being sick. They were covering the next person.
Was that, how dark were
It
your
was
thoughts
hurtful.
during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't mad at anybody, but
Right.
it made me realize, okay, it's not the trophies jumping off the shelf and helping me. There were some faithful friends, but it was really my faith. It was me realizing, okay, God, I've heard about you my whole life. I've sat on pews, but this is bigger than me right now, and I can't get through this. I'm hurting. And that's when I discovered the Word of God, like why it wasn't like an assignment for me to have to memorize Scripture, because that's what it always felt like in school. It was life. It was words that were active and living and that could give me guidance and help me, and promises that I'm with you.
So when you had all those, at that moment, is that when your faith, maybe from your parents, is that when the faith sort of became yours?
It became
you became in a relationship with Christ, I guess.
That is such a big statement, because I think especially the danger of growing up in the church and you hear about it all the time. I never not believed it, but I did not have my own relationship with the Lord. It was my grandparents' relationship, my parents' relationship. It was them dragging me to church. When I went to college, I went to church because I knew they were going to ask me on Sunday, did you go to church? I'm living in Florida, 20 years old, and I'm going just for the reason that I know they're going to ask me, and I don't want to tell them no.
Dang, yeah.
And so, but then eventually things started happening in life that I had to figure out. And it wasn't my parents that could fix it. I didn't have the answers, and I started turning to the Lord for those answers. And He never failed me. And that's when my faith started to grow. And during the same time, I'd been asked, since I was 15 years old, to stand up on platforms and share about God at tournaments all around the world.
Really?
France, Singapore, Canada, Mexico, different places.
You said it was since you were 15 years old? Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Because the boat company I skied for, Ski Nautique's a Christian company. And Mr. Ralph Malone he was a strong believer. He would come up to me, hey, we're going to be at the World's next week in Singapore or in France. I've already got you lined up to speak.
Oh, wow, 15.
Yeah, and I'm going. But look what God was doing. He was preparing me.
For where you are now.
All the interviews on ESPN.
Yeah, right.
Prepared me for this moment to be on this podcast.
That's incredible.
All the standing up on a stage, it's all I do now is stand up on stages and share with people. Being on camera, doing broadcast and things, it all prepared me for this. But when I would travel and speak, all I knew was John 3:16. For God so loved the world. It's a big verse to know, and I believed it. I believed it, but I didn't understand it. And I knew Philippians 4:13, for I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. But I was so butchered that verse and misinterpreted it and misused it. But I would go up and share what I knew. Yeah. But when I was like 22, 23, I'm sharing with 500 teenagers in New York. I'd been brought in as the keynote speaker. And I realized I am sharing about God and Jesus, and I don't even know him. And I was sharing them with people who knew him. Because I would leave and I'd see all these kids like on their own, just over by a fire, praying or reading the word. And I was like, I don't even know what they're doing.
Like they got something I don't have.
That's exactly what I said. And when I got back to the cabin at Shroom Lake, New York, it was Word of Life Camp. I got on my knees and I said, God, I don't know what's going on out there, but I want what they have. I want to be drawing close to you just because I can.
Not because I feel like I have to. Yeah.
Because I always felt like, oh, I didn't say my prayer. So now lay me down to sleep, pray. Okay, check.
Yeah, right.
I got to read. So I would literally open, point, and read a verse and shut it. I read the Bible, check. I went to church, check. And my heart was good.
Right.
But it wasn't doing me any good.
Right.
You know, he's like, I want relationship. I want to talk with you. Don't be afraid of me. But you won't draw close to someone if you don't trust them. I didn't trust them. I was afraid of them.
And it's funny when you talk. I remember my other question, by the way, too. But I feel like with that with people too. Like when you meet people and you can tell they have a wall up, even if they're pretending they have everything together, but you can tell they're not being their true selves. Mm-hmm. It's very tough to then you put your wall up. And I'm not saying God does that, but it's like I feel like that's what we do, or maybe that's what you were doing then. Is like having your wall up, or it's just like training regimen too. Like I'm going to read the Bible in a year because your skiing was probably the same way. Like I'm going to ski however long, I'm going to do this, and then boom, that's part of a training regimen.
Boom, I'm done.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. But I know what the question I was going to ask is like, why do we tend to look at God as that punishing God or like that disappointed God? You alluded to it earlier. Like he's almost like, tisk, like, what are you doing? Like, why do we naturally think that as human beings?
Well, I think, one, you read the Old Testament.
Yeah, right.
And you see a lot of smiting and smoting.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's really hard to understand. Noah, the whole world's drowning.
Yeah.
But then when you really get in there with new eyes, after, you realize, for God so loved that he gave what was most precious to him. It says in Romans 8:32. It says he gave his son, which was his most prized possession. Won't he give you everything else? And you realize it is by grace you have been saved. It's not by your works. It's an unconditional love and you can't earn it. And you realize, okay, grace has always superseded the judgment. And if you look at the Old Testament more with those eyes of grace, you see he gave time and was so patient and kept leading them another way. Hey, can you get it? Can you get it? And they're just so stubborn and hard-hearted.
Yeah, right.
Which we are too. And so I think a lot of it is what you're hearing from the pulpit. And you got to be careful. It is grace, but it ain't you just go do whatever you want to do. Because if you truly loved God, you wouldn't want to go grieve him and make his sacrifice like a mockery.
Right.
Because you're just going to go do whatever you want. Oh, he'll forgive me. That's not right either. So, but it's also not this legalistic God. He used the ones that screwed up and continued to screw up. I mean, Peter denied him as he's on the cross. And who's one of the first ones? Go get Peter.
Right. I have a buddy who's really, really, really struggling right now with mental health and some other things, and he talks about God a lot. And he's almost convinced that he's condemned to hell. He's almost convinced that, like, he's done the unforgivable, and no matter how much you tell him sin is sin, it's all equal. No matter how much you try to, it's like, it's that wrath of God that has his mind so convinced. And I think you're spot on, but I also think it's and I don't know if that's the enemy, but I also think it's our own self-narrative of our own kind of self-hatred towards ourselves, because we are the only ones that truly know us. Yeah. I'm the only one that truly knows everything about me. And sure, I can try to share everything I can with my wife, but ultimately at the end of the day, I know me more than anyone else knows me. And so I don't know if that's also where it's rooted in, like, no, you don't know who I deserve the worst. And
yeah, we don't feel worthy of God's love, and the reality is we're not.
Right. And that's it. And that's what I tell him, but I'm like, but how do
right. You're not.
You're right. We do suck. But the good news is, it's like, it's kind of complicated in a little bit of a sense.
And it's really hard too, if maybe you haven't. For me, I had beautiful modeled parents that modeled unconditional love for me. So for me, it's easy to imagine now that I've read the words, like, you know what? God does love me. My dad loves me. My mom loves me. If I make a mistake, they might be disappointed, but they're not going to reject me. I'm their daughter. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case for everybody. They haven't experienced that love from parents. So sometimes that makes it hard, because maybe a person rejected. Maybe a person wrote you off. Recently I've studied the verse, like, I will never leave you, God says, nor forsake you. And I thought, wonder what the difference between leave and forsake is. Leave means I will not, like, temporarily turn my back on you. I won't forget about you. I think about, as a mom, I used to sit and do homework with my kids, and I'd say, I'll be right back. And I'd go in the kitchen, but then I'd forget. They were over there. And like an hour later, Mom, no, I left you. I forgot you. Right. I went off to another store, and I forgot you were in that store. You were in need, and I left you for a minute. God doesn't do that, but he also doesn't abandon you, forsake you. And that's a word that means so disgusted with you, so much disdain in his heart that he turns his back on you forever. God doesn't do either. He doesn't forget about you, leave you for a second, nor does he get so disgusted with you and so frustrated with you that he gives up on you.
So in other words, his presence will never be out of your reach.
Right.
Nor will it ever be.
It's only if
or given
you
away.
Won't receive it.
Right. And it's funny. Now, he's not from here, but I'll tell him,
I hope he hears this. And,
and
amen. It's not us talking about it, because this is something I hear, and we get letters from our incarcerated family. God could never forgive me.
Yeah.
And then God could never love me. God could never use me. Look at Moses. You can't use me. Moses was a murderer. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. He had murdered an Egyptian.
That's right.
And that's why he was on the run. And God's like calling him back to go back to the place. He's calling him to be a mouthpiece for the Israelites. And what was he? He was a stutterer. Mm-hmm. Stutterer. That was hard to say.
I think you did it right.
So God's not looking for perfection. He's just saying, will you trust me? Mm-hmm. Will you trust my love for you? While you were a sinner, I died for you. Not when you got it right.
Right.
And I think the most beautiful picture is he's on the cross, and he's giving two people, both criminals, a rebel, one, we don't exactly know all that they did, but it's like he gave them both the opportunity. One received it, one didn't. And it wasn't because they deserved it.
And I love that too, because then they spent their whole entire life doing what they wanted to do. And so it's like, it's never too late.
And it wasn't because what they did.
Right, exactly.
It
was
faith.
Right.
It was saying, you know what? I'm going to receive your forgiveness, even though I'm not worthy.
And one thing I think I like too is he has kids too, and I think, well, what if your kids, let's say your kids slipped up, and let's say they accidentally hurt somebody in a drunk driving accident. As a father or as a mother, would you not love them even more? because you know they're hurting. Even though they were in the wrong, you love them more, I think. You know, you wouldn't abandon them, and he would agree with that. And so why do we think God would be any different? Like we are going to continually stumble our way through this. And I think through our stumbles, God's love, I don't want to say increases towards us, because I don't know if that's necessarily possible, but it's like if my son or my daughter made a mistake, I would draw closer to them in their mistake. And so I don't know how we get twisted where it's like, oh, that's why we need to be over here away from God but what's interesting is he also didn't grow up with parents. And so I think it stems in that too. And that's why I think probably a lot of this is too, if I had to guess.
Oh yeah.
I do feel like we're skiing and we're at the World Championship, Masters, just balling out on the water, but it seems like your relationship with Christ is definitely becoming a thing. And then over here we have this prison ministry that's here, so like somewhere it's going to meet these two, where we are now. So, and we are going to stop the train right there, because this is where it's almost a separate episode entirely, and it will be a separate episode entirely, where she talks about again what others won't do, what a lot of us won't do, we're all aware of, but maybe we're just not doing much for. And her work in the prisons and the inmates and what she's doing, just providing hope and sharing her story, something we all can do. So I'll put a link up here for the episode 24 to follow that back from this. I appreciate y'all's support. Please subscribe, and we'll see you soon.